Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming today. We're very lucky to have Margaret Stasiak with us, who's going to talk about conducting assessment with Avenue tools and resources. This is part one, listening and reading. A reminder that this is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube after the session. If you have any questions during the session, feel free to use the raise your hand option and we'll take note of that, or you can put your questions into the chat and we'll answer them accordingly during the session or at the end as well. So thank you very much for coming today, Margaret, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you everybody who's joining our session. I think people are still joining it. So today's session, as Paul said, it's about conducting assessment with Avenue tools and resources. So I'm going to address only two skills today, listening and reading, and there's going to be another webinar happening next week at the same time and day, and it's going to cover assessment of speaking and writing. So I've divided it into receptive and productive skills because the assessment procedures and the assessment tools are quite similar, at least in terms of the development. So let's get started here. This is our land acknowledgement here, and I would like to start with that. So New Language Solutions is based in Ottawa, Ontario. We acknowledge that our head office is in the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabeg people. Beyond Ottawa, we have staff working in locations across Canada. New Language Solutions is grateful to have the opportunity to work as a guest in communities and territories across the country, and we honor the stewardship of the many Indigenous peoples who have resided on these lands since time immemorial. We make our acknowledgement as a sign of respect for all Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, past and present. We accept the true impact of the past and the pain suffered by generations of Indigenous peoples. As an agency that works to support the integration of newcomers into Canadian society and cultures, we resolve to support activities that are inclusive of Indigenous peoples. We'll make our best efforts to address a history of injustice to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We encourage our frontline staff and clients to discover those traditional territories they live on and pause to reflect on the hospitality shown to us as guests in the territories. Let me just get started here with our first slide. So in this presentation, as I mentioned, we're going to touch on only two skills, the assessment of two skills, which is listening and reading. And I'll be talking about the tools that you can use for assessing listening and reading, sorry. And the two tools that I will focus on are quiz and H5P files. I will discuss how you can use ready-made assessments that appear in units and modules in Course Builder. Also, how you can modify those assessments and how you can plan and develop your own listening and reading assessment tasks. And I'll provide some quick tips for administering listening and reading assessments in different modalities using the tasks that you have developed on your own or that appear in the Avenue Course Builder. Okay. And as I mentioned before, and as Paul mentioned, if you have any questions, please raise your hand or just ask your question in the chat and I'll try to answer it as it comes up. Okay, so the first question though is for you, and that's the question that I would like to hear your answers on. And the question is, what tools do you use for listening and reading assessments? And there are different options. So ready-to-use quizzes on Avenue, your own quizzes that you create on Avenue, your own H5P Avenue, files on Avenue, paper-based tools, do you still use those and upload them to ePortfolio on Avenue? And other, if you have any other options that you use in your teaching, please include your answers in a chat. Thank you. And we'll just take some time to do that.
Cheryl has asked, what if I use more than one? Good point, Cheryl. Maybe just check the one that you use the most often.
Yeah, true. Or you can just write that in a chat that you use more than one. Yeah, which is possible, actually. Yeah. Okay, so I think we can take a quick look at the answers. So as I can see, most people who are attending this webinar are actually developing their own quizzes, which is amazing and it's great. And then the second group of people are using quizzes on Avenue and other, which we're going to check. And then paper-based tools again that are quite often used in different courses. Okay. Paul, could you read the options in the chat that people wrote under other?
Yes, we've got a few
Okay,
different
thank you
ones
so
here.
much. Yeah.
Using more than one, mostly my own quizzes, but some ready to use.
Hmm.
My own creation in Google Classroom,
Okay.
uh, both H5Ps and quizzes in Avenue created by myself. And the
Hmm.
program, one writer here, Jane, the program I work in doesn't use Avenue, so quizzes in Moodle. They must have their own
Okay.
in-house
Yeah.
LMS. Yeah.
Okay, that's excellent. It's really very informative. Yeah. So, in today's presentation, I'm going to address the needs of varied groups of instructors who use different tools, but I will focus on the quiz in H5P that you can use. That you can use the existing ready-to-use quizzes in H5Ps. As is in your courses, but you can also use them as a model because there's some good practices that appear in those quizzes and some tricks of the trade, I would say, that you can also apply when creating your own quizzes. So I just wanted to show an example of a very typical unit that you can see in the course builder, in Avenue Course Builder. And the course typically, the course typically includes several units. This is what most instructors do. They request units from the course builder. And I just wanted to say that when you want to order the unit from the course builder, it typically includes at least one assessment tool that appears in there. And it can be for one of the skills that are practiced in that unit, or it can be for multiple skills that appear in there. And I'm just going to take you to an example of the unit like that. So one of the units that I have prepared here is the unit called Reading News and Feature Articles. And that unit is for CLB 5, 6, and up learners. So you can modify its content to meet the learner's need at those particular CLB levels. As you can see, the unit includes the part for instructors, and I'm sure you're familiar with those documents, and then a part for learners. And a lot of the elements that are listed in here are not just skill building activities, but they're also potential elements of e-portfolio, learners e-portfolio. And these are things like surveys that provide some insight into learners' needs. There is the reading practice task. There is an assessment task. There's also a self-reflection that can be completed by the learner. And all of these items that I have just mentioned can be part of their e-portfolio. Now, the two activities that we're going to focus on are the ones that serve for assessment purposes. So in here, we have the practice task that can precede the assessment task. But this is as if you are using this unit as is. And as you know, you don't have to use the units that are in Course Builder as they are. You can also change them and modify them to your needs and to your style of teaching. So you can split them, you can separate them, you can remove the activities that you don't need, and you can adjust some of the content and use it as assessment if this is what fits your class. So in here, I just wanted to say that we have two practice, reading practice task and the reading assessment task. And as you can see, if you want to preview them, you can preview them here as if you are completing the quiz, but you can also look at their PDF files. So in here we have a reading practice task, and each assessment tool that is listed in the course builder has a PDF or Word file included for the instructor to take a look, and that task includes the CLB information, the task information, the assessment criteria indicating which question targets which level of understanding or specific comprehension items in that task, the possible procedure that you could use for that task, and the reading text, as in here, as well as the answer key for the instructor. So in this case, this is the answer key, which means you cannot use this PDF file as is, and you will need to modify it and remove the bold answers if you would like, and maybe shuffle the answers if you would like to use it in a different modality than online. And it is possible to do because you can go to that specific, excuse me, to that unit and go to the folder with the instructor files and get that file for reading practice task from here, download it to your computer, make the changes and adjust, excuse me, the questions or even the text itself as you need, and then use it either online by creating your own quiz or using it in a paper-based format and just do different things with it. So let's go back to our presentation. So, but basically, when you use the ready-to-use units, they already have a prescribed way of administering that specific assessment task that is included in it. And very often you may look at the task and you say, that's not everything that I taught in my unit, or maybe I want to change it for a different CLB level. So you may need to make the changes as you go. Now, in order to do all of that, you really need to familiarize yourself in the with the content of the task and with the unit and whatever is taught in there. So you would need to preview all of the unit first. Just take a look at what is detailed in there, what are skill using activities, and then decide whether you want to use the task that is in there, preview the PDF file. It is important that you test that task as a learner, so you can switch your role using the profile and just switch your role to the student and then complete the task as if you were a student. And see how the navigation feels, how difficult the questions are. Maybe there are the words that you have not exposed your learners to, and maybe that needs to be adjusted, and so on. Then also you will need to prepare learners for assessment, and I'm going to address that later when we talk about administering an assessment task. And then finally administer the task in either modality that you used to choose it on. So you can use it online in an asynchronous modality or online in your web conferencing session. And again, I'm going to address it a little bit later in our presentation. Okay, so anytime you want to make any changes to the quiz, or you want to modify it, or you want to develop your own, I think there are a few considerations that you may need to think about and take into account before you start working on it. So I think one of the most important things would be to use Sandbox, your Sandbox course, for developing any of the new quizzes that you have. And I think it's important because Sandbox course allows you to try different things and see how things work for you and for the learners in your class. So you may have one or two versions of the similar task and just see which one works better. And this way you can try and test different types of questions, different layout, different images, different ways of presenting the text, and so on. What is also important is that you preview various assessments at the CLB level that you teach. So I would just go to the course builder and look at different units and modules. And there are different units and modules created by different developers and by different organizations, and they vary in style. They all have all the prerequisite information and format that is required for the quiz, but they all have a little bit different knowledge and skills that they use to develop those tasks, and you can learn quite a lot from those. Another step when you start developing your own quiz is to decide on listening or reading text that you're going to use. So select that that text carefully, make sure that is appropriate for the CLB level that you're teaching. And once you have that number, decide on the number and types of questions that you're going to use. And I'm going to address all of these items in a moment in detail. And once you have a sense of what you're going to do, I would draft the tool in a file that you can edit or maybe even share or collaborate in with your co-instructors. So you can use a Word file or a Google document and just write the questions, insert the audio or the text in there, include the images if you're going to put them in there, and then write out the questions so you have a clear sense of what is going to be included in that quiz. And you can move the questions around, change their order, adjust the answers, and so on. And once you're done with that, once you have a good sense of what your quiz is going to look like, create an actual quiz in Avenue, but in your sandbox course. So make sure that you include a description that presents what that particular assessment task is about. You will also need to include things like procedures, task procedures, certain important information about the length and the number of attempts, the number of submissions, and so on. Then create the questions in that quiz, which I'm going to show you in a moment. Edit the settings for the quiz, and those settings will reflect what you put in the descriptions and procedures for the task. And then do the tagging that is necessary for auto collection of your task. And this way you ensure that each of the learners who completed the task will receive it as an artifact in their e-portfolio. And once your quiz has been drafted, test the quiz as a learner, see what it looks like from the learner's perspective, modify it as needed. You may try different things, and you can even change the questions if you need to. And as you go through that process, it is a good idea to apply principles of the universal design for learning, and that ensures that your quizzes just reflect best practices of online learning, accessibility, allowing learners to use different strategies and different ways of demonstrating their knowledge of their language that they have acquired. Okay. So now, before we get into the details, I just wanted to say that when you set up your quiz, and I'm going to look at the actual quiz in a moment. I know it's very kind of difficult to talk in abstract right now, but decide on how you want to set up your quiz with its different elements. So as I said before, it is very important to include the CLB information and the task procedures. And this is the part that is read by the learner. So the CLB information is also going to be included in tagging. So this is something that is for you as an instructor for the e-portfolio. But the learner still needs to know all that information. So the question is, where do you put it? Do you put it in the description of the quiz that is going to appear on your course page, or do you want to include it as the first question, which has the format of a description, and then it's going to be part of the quiz? It's up to you what you want to do, and I'll show in a moment how it's been done in the quizzes on Avenue. And that part that you're going to write for the learner needs to include the CLB level, the skill. You can include the competency statement or just the competency area, and the task. So the instruction for the task, what the task involves, and how many questions maybe it is, how long the text is, and so on. Then the time limit that the learner will have to complete the task. Also the number of attempts, the number of submissions, and all those kind of technical details that they need to know. And I recommend that you set the time limit that depends on the CLB level, and also the number of attempts. I think works best if it's reduced to one. So you avoid multiple submissions and dealing with those, because then it's just very confusing, and it's not necessarily a good PBLA practice as well. And then, excuse me, you need to include instructions and strategies for completing tasks. And this is something that we may need to do over and over again, especially with continuous intake. You may feel like you need to repeat these things, and it's best if they are written with the task, within the task somewhere. So these would be strategies like, for example, preview the questions before you start listening. You can listen more than once. This is something important that learners may need to know, especially if you choose the layout that is done all on one page. and then review your answers before you submit and before you make your submission, and so on and so on. I think the best idea for collecting all of these tips would be, all of these procedures would be just to write them all down on in one file, collect them all, edit them, and adjust them to the CLB. And this is something you can share with your co-instructors, so you can use that and make sure that everything is caught in that document. And every time you have a new learner joining your class, this is something that you can present to them and share, so they can actually be up to date with all the procedures. Okay. So let's now move on to more of the practical examples that we're going to use. But another point, that when you develop your quizzes is, or any kind of assessment tasks, but especially online, is word the instructions work very, very carefully. It's not only considering the CLB level, but it's also making sure that the instructions are clear and they do not they're not a task to complete in themselves, so the learner doesn't have to struggle with it. And decide on formatting that you're going to use. Unfortunately, quiz, Moodle fonts are very limited in quiz, so you don't have a lot of choices, but you can choose different sizes. It's important to use spacing, especially for lower level learners or literacy learners. You may need to use a lot of white space around the text, and decide on the layout and navigation. So the layout of your quiz, when I talk about layout, I mean when and where the learner will see the listening and reading text and the questions that follow. So in quiz, you have an opportunity to create that quiz that has that everything is on one page, which means the listening and the reading text and all questions are on one page. And this is something that works really well for long texts and high CLB levels. It requires scrolling, so it may not apply well, it may not work well on all devices, especially phones. And it might be quite challenging for low CLB level learners. Also, when you include the listening material, you may choose to illustrate that audio file with an image, not necessarily reflecting the meaning of that listening, but something that will accompany it, and it's not going to look too dense on that page. And another option that you can have in quiz is have quiz formed as multiple pages. So that means that the listening or reading text appears on every question, and each combo like that, the text and the question, is on a separate page. And that works really well for low CLB levels. It also works well for listening text that varies from question to question. For example, you may have different commands on each, maybe on a set of 2 or 3 questions, and then switch it to another command or something like that. Or you may have a slightly different image, or you may have the same image, but it's a formatted text image. So that means it's let's say it's a medication label, or it's a paste tab, or something that requires different kind of reading. Then it will be more appropriate to have it on each question. And overall, keep the layout of your quiz and all the information included there very streamlined, uncluttered, and make sure that the navigation is intuitive, so it wouldn't be too difficult for the learner to move from question to question, and also to identify all the parts of your quiz. And also another thing is, if you create the quiz, or if you use a certain type of quiz with certain types of questions and it works really well for your learners, I would just use the same type over and over, because that just helps them with their digital skills, helps them feel more confident when performing the assessment tasks, and just will just render better results for them. And let's look at a few samples that I have here. Let me just close that. So we don't have too many. So I just created a separate unit with, excuse me, with just different samples of listening and reading assessments, just to show you different arrangements and different ways in which you can set up the quiz. So the first one is the CLB2 listening assessment task. And it consists, I'm just going to show you this. So it consists of the description. This is the description that you need to complete before you actually get into the quiz itself. That description includes all the information that is pertinent to the task. So you have here the task itself, the CLB level, and the competency area here. Then the task itself, listen to the conversation, how many questions are here, and so on. Then the number of attempts. You can complete this task only once, and then it's going to be saved in here. And the success score is here, and the steps on how to complete it. So we're just going to take a quick preview. So if I were a student, I would just say attempt quiz now, and then just would do it. But here I am previewing it, and I wanted to show you what it looks like. So in this quiz, we have a listening file. So on the first question in this quiz is called the description. Again, I know it's a little bit confusing, but it's basically in Moodle, the description is anything that does not have any interaction. So in here, we have just a simple instruction for the whole task. Just a reminder for them, you can complete this task only once, so the learners know. They know how many questions this quiz includes, and I think it's important to put it in here so they can time their task and see how and just plan their thing. They can also preview the questions when they access the quiz. And then there's a little image here that does not really reveal any content of the of that conversation, because it is the conversation between a salesperson and a customer. But it just basically provides a little bit of the context and makes it look a little bit better than if it were just the listening tool here. And then we have a set of 8 questions. These questions are multiple choice, so you can see they look like this, and they're very simple, straightforward. All the learner does is click one of the answer choices. Here we have only 2 answer choices, yes or no. And then again, it's this. So it's pretty straightforward. There's no need to really go very creative with questions. They work well, and it's relatively streamlined for the learner at the CLB 3-4 level. Okay, I'm going to present a different kind of assessment task with images. So this task is for CLB2. It's a listening assessment task again, so it involves audio. All the information is in here, similarly to the previous one. Okay, I think I can preview it. So I'm going to start a new preview here. So in this task, because the task is around understanding comprehension of polite requests for performing certain chores, like could you do the dishes or could you water the plants? In this task, in this kind of task, there is a slightly different listening recording on each question space. And as you can see, each question is on a separate page. And in here we have the listening, and then one of the answer choices need to be clicked on by the learner. And as you can see, the answer choices are not sentences or words, but they are just images. So the learner can select the image, and then once they're done, they're going to go to the next page, and so on. So this is the way this assessment is set up. So it's a little bit different. It works really well with the low CLB level. And it takes a little bit longer to set it up, and because you need to find good images that would reflect what is in there, but it's absolutely worth it. And then the next example that I'm going to show is a reading task again. This time it's a reading practice task. So as you can see in the description that we have here, we don't have all the limitations that we have included in the other tasks. So we don't say how many attempts are there here. and how many there are here, and how much time the learner has to complete this task, because they can do it as many times as they want to. Just for our sake, I said it here, but you have flexibility with that. So you can, for example, allow 2 attempts for that task because it's a practice task, or you can extend the time limit and so on. So I'm just going to go to the preview again. And in this time, because it's a practice task, and it is a low CLB level, what we did in here was we included the listening, the audio file, and the text. So the text that is here is supported by the listening. The learner can actually read it and listen to it at the same time. So it's not only just the assessment of their reading, but they can also still benefit from listening to it. And again, the questions that are in here, they have only 2 choices. It just makes it easier for them. There is a question that has a multiple choice with multiple answers. That's another option that you can use in your questions, and I'll discuss the questions in a moment. So in here, the learner will need to select 3 things, not just one, from the list provided here. And when designing these questions, you just need to be very careful when you set the scoring for that type of question. And again, yes, no questions, which are quick and easy to complete by the learner. And in here, because it is reading and listening, it's all together on one page. If you would like to, you can easily change that into separate pagination. I'm going to show that to demonstrate that in a moment, how quickly you can actually do that in a quiz preview mode. So let me just quiz editing mode, sorry. Okay, let's look at another assessment. This time it's a listening assessment for CLB6 level that involves video. So in this assessment, the learner watches the video of the person talking about their job and what they do. They answer 10 questions. They have 20 minutes. And there's a score here and the instructions how to get to that particular task. And then they go into the unit. So in here, we have another way in which we have set up the quiz. It's all the information about the task and the competency area, and the success score is here. And then in here, we have just the video and the questions that go with the video. So as you can see, again, different types of questions. Okay, but most of them are just multiple choice. This one is multiple choice with multiple answers, not to complicate it too much. And I'll explain that in a moment, why it's done this way. Okay. Another way in which you can, so this is all about listening and just a few reading, and now accompanied by listening. Now, let me just present a few reading tasks that I display here. So this is a reading assessment task for CLB2. And again, I'm just going to skip the description that includes all that information here, because I wanted to show you how it's been set up for CLB2 level. So in here, we have a single page, we have a multiple page quiz with a single page dedicated only to the reading text and the question. So when the quiz really is based on formatted text that requires scanning and locating the very specific details in the text, this is a better way to present the text and the question. So the learner does not need to scroll up and down. And also for CLB1-2, it's just easier to have that much of the text in front of them and go to the next page, and it's exactly the same setup. So you have the question with multiple choice options, and then the reading task, the reading text that is displayed in here. In this case, the reading text was included as an image. So as I said before, let me just show you if I edit that question. I just wanted to show you what it looks like. So if you want to include any text that requires very specific formatting, I think the best option is to create that text in another source. So you can use PowerPoint or Word, create your image, save it as a picture, and then upload it here. When you upload it, you just use that little icon to put it in here. You can size it as you need it. You can center it, put it on the left or right as you need it, and then include the question here, the multiple choice. I'm going to demonstrate that a little bit later when we get to the specific questions. So let's look at another example. It's going to be a reading task, getting information from the pay stub. This time it's a practice task, and it has a very similar type of text in terms of the formatted text. But because it is a higher CLB level, all the questions are together. So that stub is here, the pay stub is here. It was created in PowerPoint or Word, and then it's been saved as an image and put in here. And you can size it or adjust it so it fits the whole width of that column and it looks nice and it's big enough for the learner to read. And then you have multiple choice questions. This works, and if we don't have too many questions that follow the reading or listening. So if you have, for example, more than 10 questions, like 12, I think that would be just very tiring and tedious for the learner to scroll up and down. But if we have about 6 or 7 questions, that works just fine. And it's a good way of presenting it together. And finally, I wanted to show you an example of the reading assessment task with a different type of questions that involves writing that is an open-ended question. So in here, this is a reading task for CLB 6 learners, and it consists of 2 reviews. And learners read these 2 reviews and answer comprehension questions that involve comparing the 2 texts or the information in both texts and drawing conclusions and formulating opinions. So it's a different, it's an upper level of comprehension, and for that we require different types of questions. So in here, I wanted to also to point out that if you want to embellish a little bit your text so it doesn't look that dry and simple in quiz, you may actually create images for elements that accompany the Moodle text. So this is an image and this is an image, but everything else is the Google text. And this way you guarantee that that text looks crisp and clear. Sometimes when you copy the text in form of an image, that text may not be very clear, especially if you enlarge it very much, then it's not a good experience for the learner. So I wanted to say that this is again an image, and you can adjust and you can wrap text around it so it looks good, and it kind of replicates what an online review could look like. And then we have questions in here, different types of questions. Most of them are multiple choice with multiple answers possible. And a lot of these questions reflect different comprehension items that you would target in your PBLA assessment. So they may refer to understanding specific words and expressions, they may refer to inferred meanings, and so on. But sometimes you may need to include a different type of question that would target the understanding and processing the information included in that reading. And in here we have that type of question, which is really an essay type of question where they write a few sentences that would include the answer. So here we just, as you can see, the instructions need to be very specific for that. So you need to provide how many sentences the learner needs to write, how many supporting details they need to include, and then what the scoring is going to be. So they are prepared and they need to ensure that they included everything that is required. Now, I wanted to say one more thing, that when choosing this type of question, you need to keep in mind that you will need to mark the whole quiz manually. So when the quiz consists only of multiple choice, yes, no questions, then the whole marking process is automated and you don't need to worry about it. All you get is the ready score that you can look at and see what the learner did well and what they didn't do well. And you can also preview the result and see what was in there. However, in case of the quiz that includes any of the short answer or long answer questions, you will need to manually grade the whole quiz, and which is not a long process, but it's just something that you may want to consider when designing different types of questions for your assessment. I'm going to come back to the types of questions in a moment when I talk about the specifics. So let me just go back to the presentation. Okay, so that was about the samples of different layout, how they can be presented. Now let's think about the example that you can actually create using the existing resources. And as an example, I chose one of the resources that is available on Tutela. And as you know, Tutela has a huge collection of different types of tasks. I would just focus on the task that's been aligned with CLB and met all the requirements. So it has been vetted by Tutela, and it's certain that it meets all the PBLA requirements, and it's also aligned with the CLB. And let me just go to that resource in a moment. I just wanted to go over the steps that you would need to take when creating your own quiz. So in here, first, I would just download the listening or the reading file that you're going to use, or you may type it in and so on. You can use the audio file, you can use a video file, you can use the text and just type it in, or you can use the text that is an image. Review the questions in the tool that is already prepared, and if needed, adapt, modify the questions, maybe change the format in which they appear, and save that as a new file. And you can add this document to your sandbox as well, so you can keep it in there and refer to it later. Set up the questions in your quiz and decide on the layout, whether you want a one-page or multi-page quiz, or you want the description that includes the extra information and so on, and then edit settings and tags. And I'm going to go there in a moment. Let me just go to that resource here first. Okay, I have to log in, it kicked me out. So in here, it's one of the tasks that I picked. It's the collection of the real world tasks. And in here, I just picked the assessment task. I didn't look at any of the modules, just the assessment task. Understanding a PSA about the flu, it's for CLB4. It consists of 3 files. So in here, you have the PDF file, and this is what we're going to look at. It also has a Word file, and this is the file. Either of these 2 files you can put into your sandbox. You can download it from here, put it there. And there's also the audio file, as you can see. So you can download it here, or you can click on that little symbol here, which allows you to download it to your computer. So anytime you see the symbol like that, and it has these 3 dots, it allows you to download that particular audio file. So you can download it to your computer and then upload it to the quiz that you're creating. So just looking at this, let's look at this assessment task. It has a lot of additional information that you can use for teaching, but also it has the transcript of the text that you're going to use, and it has the specific questions. You just look at these questions and you see the type of questions that you have in here, and you see these are mostly true-false questions, multiple choice with multiple answers, multiple choice with single answers, and then the score. And this is a ready tool that you can just take as is and just put into a quiz, having the skills to do that, right? So this is just an additional document. This is the answer key that you can use to create your quiz. So it's quite simple and straightforward, as I said. Okay. Okay. Let's move on to the next slide. So in here, Now, when you create the quiz, the process is, again, as I said, in detail. Let's just look at the specific elements. So for listening assessment, you can insert the audio file or the video file for that matter. And if you want to, if this is just the audio file, you can add an image if it is appropriate. So if it is a conversation, you can have just two people, the faces of two people, and or just the images that are not necessarily photos, but something that is just the vector drawing of just to signal what it is. For reading assessments, you would insert the reading text, or you would type in that text as in Moodle text, or if you want to, you can use the image, which is a little bit more difficult, may require more work on your part. And when you're done with that step and you develop the questions, test the learner view for layout and accessibility again, right? So see how you can switch that view in your profile. Let me just show you in here. Like I'm in my course in here. So what I would do, I would just go here to my profile and just switch role using this profile, switch role. Hello. Okay, to student. And this will allow me to see my quiz as a student. I'm just going to cancel that because I'm not going to do that. Okay, let's go back to our presentation here. Okay, now the types of questions that you will use in your quiz can really vary. And as you can see, you can be quite creative when you use a PDF form to do your quiz, or a paper-based tool. But I think in online environment, the best question types that are really user-friendly for the learner and do not complicate the whole process of completing the task would be multiple choice or true false. And one of the big advantages of those is the automated grading. And they work really well for lower CLB levels. They're quite intuitive, so the learner is able to figure out what they need to do. Now, one of the most important things that you may consider is using sentence stems instead of true questions. So instead of asking, what is the date of this letter, you can say this letter, maybe not in this case, sorry, I just wanted to present you with the example. What is this note for? Instead of asking the question, what is this note for, and then have three choices, you could say this note is for, and have the three choices. So this way the learner doesn't have to process so much information in the question itself. As something to consider for low CLB levels. Then you can also notice that in many resources and in many ready paper-based assessments, you have matching or sequencing. So matching and sequencing questions are quite difficult in terms of scoring, calculating the score, and then figuring out how to complete them by the learners. So I think it's pretty, it can be an unfair assessment if we use matching or sequencing type of questions, because in case of matching, when one item is not matched correctly, that means that another item has to be unmatched as well. So that means that by not completing one item well, the other one gets a negative score as well. So this is something you may need to consider when developing this kind of questions. You may want to consider using numbers. So the learner will need to type the number next to the item that you want to match, or maybe they need to number the sentences so you get the sequence of the items that you want, instead of using those types of two questions. They work really well in activities, even as practice tasks, but I think in the assessment, they may create a bit of, they may be a bit problematic in terms of scoring. Now, open-ended answers, as I showed before, you can use these. There are two types that you can use in Moodle Quiz. One is the short response, and it's a very short response. I would consider it just for a few words, 2 or 3 words, and the long response, which is an essay type of question, which is appropriate for applied comprehension. So it's for upper levels of comprehension, such as CLB 5 and up. And I wanted to show that when you do that when you use that type of question in your quiz, what you can do is, this is the example we looked at before. When you are designing that type of question, make sure that you include all of that information in here. And for your own use, when you need to manually check it, when you develop this type of question, include that information in the section that is called greater information. So in greater information, you see all of that information that was included for the learner. But for you, it says how many points you need to give for every item that is included. So it's 1 point for each sentence with a supporting detail, and the focus of the question is response to the reading text. So assign the points for statements, So you can see the detailed information is here, and it helps if you're, for example, co-teaching your class with another instructor and somebody else is marking the questions, or if you just get in the mode of marking and scoring, and you just kind of want to be reminded about what you need to assign the score for. So if you have, especially if you have more than one open-ended questions, it might be easy to get confused, and it's a good reminder to put it in here. So when you actually score, when you grade that task, it's going to be displayed for you as a grader. So I'm just going to cancel that view and go to our here and go to our presentation. Okay. And a few things that you need to keep in mind when you develop a quiz. It's really important not to duplicate quizzes. I think it's kind of tempting when you see a good quiz and you say, oh, I'm going to make a duplicate and then I'll change a question or two and it will work. But no, it won't, because every time you change the question, it's going to change that question in all the quizzes that have the same question bank. So it's really complicated. It's a very complex thing that involves the question bank, and I think it's just safer to develop your own quiz from scratch, even if you change a question or two. Then set up questions categories very carefully when you develop your quiz. I wanted to show you that in a moment. Let's
If I could just interrupt for a moment,
yeah,
Margaret, we
sure,
do
sure.
have
Yes.
a hand raised.
Mhm.
Shabana, would you like to ask your question? You can unmute yourself.
Hi, I just had a question. What do you suggest about copying? Because I have been copying quizzes,
Mhm.
and what I do when I create a quiz in my sandbox, I make a copy of it and I move it to my courseware, and I leave the original over there for my other teachers to make a copy, and then we share among ourselves. And I haven't been having any issues with that.
Mhm.
So, have you tried copying?
Yeah, I've tried copying, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
happened when I copied it within the same course even. And I
Mm-hmm.
copied that quiz and I changed one of the questions. The questions were changed in the other quiz as well.
Oh.
So yeah, that's the problem. So I wanted to show you when you actually when you edit no, when you edit quiz, sorry, I just clicked on the wrong thing. Oh, simple quiz again. So when you edit the quiz in here, and you edit any of the questions in here, it's important to change that. So this is the complex part of creating the quizzes, but I think it's important to make sure that your sample quiz that you're using, that quiz that you're working on, is really part of your sandbox. So I always make sure that this is part of that unit, because it really depends on the quiz that you're duplicating. At the time when some of the units were developed, at that time the developers maybe were not that well versed with the with all the quiz features, and one simple quiz can come with the whole question bank that has multiple questions, and then what happens is when you duplicate that quiz, you're going to drag all the content bank into your course, and then that course really has a lot of data. And then another thing is that changing those questions when you use the duplicated course. So it's always very important to change that category. And I think the details of that are all listed in the help file that is available on Learn IT to Teach, and I'm going to point you to that in a moment. But it's something that is really, that raises a little flag when you do it, and something to be aware of. So I hope that is helpful. I know I kind of ran over it quickly, but I just wanted to alert you to that. But this is one of the things you need to keep in mind.
Thanks.
So set up the category just in case to avoid it, and bringing the whole question bank with you with that duplicated quiz. And then I think if you create your quiz from scratch and then you duplicate it, there shouldn't be too many issues with that. But it's about the ones that are especially in the content, in the course builder, because this is where we had some problems with them. Then give unique and meaningful names to your quiz questions. This is really, really important. So they're not repeated. And then review the quiz score in the edit quiz mode. This is something, again, I wanted to show. This is the edit quiz mode. Make sure that the total of these scores adds up to this. Because by default, that maximum grade you will see here is 10. And then if you don't correct it here, this is not going to work. So you need to make sure that this is the same. Okay, one of the things to be aware of. And finally, check settings and tags before administering your task. So again, all that information is included in help files. I might not be able to show it right now. Let me just go here quickly because I can see that we are running out of time. But I just wanted to show that task here, for example. You just go to edit settings, and in those settings, you just complete things for timing, for the grade, for submissions, activity completion, and how many times one can extra restrictions on attempts as well. And then finally tags. This is where you will need to do your tagging. So right now we have ePortfolio and reading. So it's auto-collected for the learner's reading folder. So that's about it. And finally, I wanted to show you how you can use H5Ps. And we have 1 minute, so I'm going to race through it. But you can use an H5P activity for assessment purposes. This is one of the activities that has the auto collection set up for ePortfolio. And what you can do is basically use any existing H5P and change it in such a way that it can become an assessment task. And I wanted to show you an example that I have here in this unit that I prepared. So for example, here I have an H5P that's part of a different module, and that H5P is about reading a pay stub. But let's say I'm doing all the other activities that are skill building and skill using, and I want to use this activity because it has a nice slide 6 and 7 with an with a possible reading task that you can use, with a possible task that can be used as reading. So it would be here, this one, and this one here. Sorry. So you have a nice image in here of the pay stub, and then you have a set of 10 questions. So you say, I could use this as my assessment task. So all you need to do is download this particular H5P. I wouldn't duplicate it. I wouldn't take it from any other place. I would just download it from here. When you click reuse, you can download it to your computer. Download it to your computer and then give it a completely unique name. Put it into your new unit in your sandbox. Work while you're in your sandbox, you need to work in your content bank to be able to change that, to edit that activity. And what you can do, just edit all the other slides, keep this particular slide that you can use as an assessment, delete everything else, and just use that. You will also need to change the cover slide so it alerts the learner this is the assessment. You can need to include the procedures here and all the other information about the CLB competency or CLB area and so on. But this can be a very good assessment task as well. And then you will need to go to the edit settings, which is on your course page. And again, do the tagging, do the grading here and activity completion and the number of attempts that you allow learners for this particular task. And I'm just going to very quickly go through one more slide, which is in here. I just included the information about where you can go to get really good tips on writing effective questions and how you should word them so they are appropriate for different levels. I thought it might come handy in here. So one is writing effective questions and one is writing effective CLB aligned comprehension questions, but both of them really are set in the context of link programs. So writing effective questions, it's the just a very good article about different types of questions that can be used for different levels of comprehension. And then the other one is the article written by one of the PBLA consultants. So it's in here on the Tesla Ontario. It's part of the Tesla Ontario contact, but you can get the whole article in here. It's really interesting on how you should word the specific questions for with short responses, with long responses, multiple choice, and so on. So it's good information. And finally, I just wanted to just talk briefly about the administering the assessments. When you administer these assessments that are prepared as quizzes or H5Ps, you can really, it's really important to prepare learners for that assessment. So review the PDF files that are included in the units first for yourself. But with learners, have a discussion on academic honesty, on self-directed learning. So alert learners to the fact that they need to complete the assessment on their own. They cannot be assisted by their family members. That there's a special, they need to create this very specific environment for their assessment so they're not distracted and they can complete it in one sitting and so on. Provide practice in using an assessment tool that you use most of the time. So it's either quiz or H5P. I think it's really, it makes it easier for the learner if you use the streamlined tool and you streamline your assessments. So you use the same tool over and over and over because it builds their confidence in terms of digital skills. And go over the task procedures and details. Prepare that sheet that you can always display before the task or give to the learners that have joined your program in the middle. And make sure you check understanding with the learners so it's clear that everybody knows what they're supposed to do. For lower CLB levels, you can set up assessments in face-to-face sessions. So you can do it either in person in the classroom or in your web conferencing tool. Again, review and demonstrate how to complete that task. Provide practice tasks before the assessment. And for CLB levels that are lower or learners that have lower digital skills, be available for support or technical troubleshooting that may happen at any time when you don't expect that during assessment. That might refer to the higher levels as well. And for during the actual task when it's being performed by learners, monitor their performance of the task just to see if they're being successful and they get and everything is working fine. Monitor the scores and artifacts once they have been auto-collected in the e-portfolios. Review the task with the class or individually as needed and reflect on the task for your own purposes. So see what worked, see what didn't work, what can be improved, and what else you can do to offer learners a better learning experience. This is a list of the support files, Avenue support files that you can find. Let me just go. So as you can see, a lot of files are available in stage 2. This is just managing quizzes and managing H5Ps and tagging for auto collection. It's all here. But the more advanced stuff that I talked about, developing your own quizzes and H5Ps, is in stage 3. And I'm just going to show you, go to Avenue Support here, and you go to Avenue Support stage 2. This is where you can see, you can find those specific files in here, right? All the files about ePortfolio are very relevant for you. And managing quizzes, managing H5Ps, it's all here. And if you are willing to develop your own quizzes, Avenue Stage Support is here. So you can see that the whole section is dedicated to developing your own quizzes. So it's quite a lot, but you don't need to go through all of it. If you decide to develop only multiple choice, yes, no questions, short answer, this is enough for you to know. Just select the 3 help files from here and do it, or just complete the whole stage 3 training so you're more familiar with it and feel more confident as well. So this is all that I had for today, and I'm really sorry I was rushing through it so much, and I can see a lot of comments in chat, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Only a couple of questions in the chat, Margaret, and
Sure.
one of them was answered in the chat, so that's great.
Okay,
H5P,
perfect.
just to check, H5P doesn't come with built-in timing restrictions, right? You would have to add,
Right,
yeah,
right. So
and
you
you
would
could
have
do
to
that.
monitor it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, you could use the restrictions to add restrictions, but for time, but that would mean the students would have to do it at a particular time, to
exactly.
limit the amount of
Yeah.
time they had that way. So maybe watching over them the best way. The other question was a great session, great examples, and participants would like to know if there's any way they can have a copy of your sample activities.
Um, they are all in the course builder. So, it's just not something that I have created for this presentation. I used everything that is already on Avenue. So, what I can do, I can create a quick handout for it and just say where these specific assessment tasks come from. So you can go back and take a look. But I think everything is in there. So I think you can just go into any, like, where's this? Course. So that course that is here, you see, I just pulled these different assessment tasks from different units. But if you go to the units in the course builder and just go to any unit, let me just go in here just quickly, just want to show it. Course builder, and I go to any of the units in here, and I see accessing local food bank, and I see what is in here. And you see a lot of that information is there in every single unit. You see there's a module, there are supporting files that you can use. And then there are the skill building activities, and there are 2 skill using or assessment files that you can use. So a lot of it is in there. So this is your resource that you can use and modify or change as needed. I also wanted to add that sometimes, rarely, but sometimes these assessment tasks may not work in quizzes as designed because there's some issues when these were transferred from other platforms. So if that happens and you come across the assessment task like that, just please let us know. You can write a note on the form and you can report it in a specific designated form, and then that task will be fixed. And once it's fixed, you will be notified and you'll know that that task is ready to go. So that's all I wanted to say. Okay.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Margaret.
Okay,
The
thank
rest of
you.
the chat seems to be all thank you, thank you. This has been great. Thank you very much. Great webinar. So lots of really positive feedback.
Great. And sorry I rushed through it so much. It's just a lot of to cover, a lot of content. I also wanted to say that the next webinar in this session happens next week at the same time. So there will be a new notification sent out, and there will be a new form to register for that webinar as well. Okay. Thank you very much.
If you have time, Margaret, there is a hand up. Maybe
Yeah,
Shubham?
sure. Yes.
Just one question. I'm sorry.
Sure.
And now I forgot my question. Oh, yeah. I was looking at the content, those course builders. I was just wondering, is this possible instead of getting the whole unit? Can we just copy one quiz? Like, for example, I just want to use one material or one stuff, one H5P from there. Is it possible to just get only one, copy it or duplicate it or put it into our courseware instead of requesting the whole content? And I don't want to use everything for
I
that
understand.
particular class.
I don't think you can do it with the quiz. With the quiz, you would have to take the whole unit,
Okay.
put it in your sandbox, delete everything else, and just use the
Okay.
quiz. So I think that's the
Yeah.
easiest way to do it.
Okay.
For H5Ps, you
Yeah.
can download the H5P if it
Yeah.
appears here. Let me just see if it's possible,
Oh,
because not
they have.
every
Okay. That would be
developer,
wonderful. Yeah.
you see, not every developer would put reuse option in
Mm-hmm.
here. So if you don't have
Yeah.
that, again, you will need
Yeah.
to, you may not
Request the whole.
even, you would
Yeah.
need to request the whole thing.
Okay.
Yes.
And one more request, if you can change the time to 3 to 4, because today I was teaching and I was having my headphones on while I was doing two things, because most of the classes finish at 3 o'clock. So if it's possible to push it to 3 to 4, otherwise I'll again have my headphones on and I'll be teaching and listening to you at the same time.
Yeah, so I
If
don't know if it is possible because it's for the whole Canada.
Mhm.
So people are in different time zones and it might be
Yeah.
problematic, like
Yeah.
there's always going to be some conflict. But the
Okay.
webinar is being recorded, as you heard at the beginning. So you
Yeah,
can
I know,
always
but yeah, I
watch.
like
But
to
then,
be talking to you in person, so the questions, burning questions can be answered right over there and then.
right,
Yeah,
yeah, I
but thank you. I
understand.
appreciate
Yeah, I
that.
totally
Yeah.
understand. Yeah,
Yeah.
no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Wonderful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you again, Margaret. And thanks
Okay, could
everyone
you
for
send?
coming.
Yeah, thank you. Could you send me the chat
I will
file?
definitely.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.